SpartanMag.com, VCast, Jim Comparoni, Paul Konyndyk. Spartan Stadium right now, signing day, Michigan State. Jonathan Smith came out talked about the 17 or 18 players they signed today, not counting Bryson Williams, who's going to be signing in February. Jonathan Smith showed some energy. I thought that his pitch was pretty solid. The big news earlier today: Jace Clarizio decided to flip from Alabama to Michigan State. Started gathering indications that would be the case early this morning. Ended up being the case. And Michigan State also adding Leonard Ayu. Been in a mission for the last 2 years, signed with Oregon State 2 years ago. Been talking about him, hinting about him a little bit on the message board last couple of days. And earlier this morning, there were some indications he was going to go to Arizona State. That didn't turn out to be true. Ends up with Michigan State. I don't think Michigan State ever thought he was wavering, but Leonard Ayu, 6'4", rangy guy, athletic guy, someone who's we've not had been writing about through this recruiting cycle, which dates all the way back to the spring. So Michigan State didn't lose anybody here at the Bell. They had to really hustle to hold on to Ayden West, and that's a player worth hustling to hold on to, a guy that Demetrius Martin did a great job to recruit. Last summer when he committed, I think he was like a high 2-star, 3-star type of guy. And I don't say this about everybody, but I looked at his junior film, very impressive, better than his ranking. And what I said on the Underground Bunker message board at SpartanMag.com after he committed, and I don't say this about everybody, I said, if you told me he was a 4-star committed to Penn State, I'd believe it. Senior year, good senior year, Ohio State offers. Not surprised that others came out. I was like, where's everybody? This guy looks pretty excellent to me. Today, Jonathan Smith, when he was asked about players that could have an immediate impact, he mentioned West is someone who has the opportunity to compete for something like that. But overall, we'll talk about the class rankings. We'll talk about underrated players. We'll talk about where this class fits and what it means for Michigan State to be ranked number 50 in the country. We'll get into all that. But first of all, your thoughts, initial thoughts about today.
Well, I think the first.
Did I mention this is Paul Konyndyk? Ladies and gentlemen, Associate Editor, SpartanMag.com.
I think the first three things you touched on, I think today made Michigan State's signing day a little bit more palatable. I know there's been a lot of grouchiness and a lot of angst. Anytime there's a kid from East Lansing High, we've seen it before. They go somewhere else, it's a problem. It's kind of like a blow to the psyche in the backyard. But a lot of people thought Ayden West was headed to Ohio State. I was kind of one of those people. Because, he's a guy that's got the Trey Waynes talent. You mentioned 2-star, and long, rangy, athletic, and the first thing that came to mind is Trey Waynes, who is also coming out of Wisconsin, underrated 2-star. But the difference being, I don't understand the Ayden West thing, because that's a big high school in Maryland, that Quince Orchard, I think it is, and it's a really heavily recruited area. So it's kind of a no-brainer. But for Michigan State to hang on to Clarizio, that's a big deal. Like, from a PR standpoint, I think he's a good player. I don't know how good he's going to be at Michigan State, but just to hang on to him, a guy that's local, to get a guy that is a rangy pass rusher type from Hawaii that they had before, they know what they got, and it wasn't a reach. This is a guy that they really liked coming in their class of 2023. He would have been in the same class as Aiden Childs in that 2023 class at Oregon State. And they really liked him there, and they kept it a secret. They went and recruited him through his parents because he's still on a Mormon mission, I take it. And so those three guys, I think that made for a good signing day and for Michigan State, given all the negativity that swirled around the program. Michigan State didn't have to have three guys today do anything for them to kind of address their needs, because there is the transfer portal. But from an optics standpoint, and I'm not big on that, but I think Michigan State fans needed some good news. So the Ayden West thing, I think, was good. Obviously, the Clarizio thing is a big, headline type deal. And then the most underrated signee, or one of the potentially most underrated signees, is Leonard Ayu. I just feel like he's got that frame. He's one of those guys that at 6'4", 6'5", once you get him in a college weight room, and we've seen this with some of the guys that they've signed where, I'm thinking of the tight end from last year. He was listed at 220, and all of a sudden he's 250 or whatever. But he's that kind of guy that you can put good weight on, and I'm not sure what he's going to play for Michigan State, maybe that rush end position. But he can run around a little bit. I like his film. That high school has turned out about 20 NFL players, Manti Te'o being one of them. That's a big-time high school in Hawaii, big-time get for Michigan State. And they did a nice job, kind of like an old-school D'Antonio type recruitment. Keep it under wraps, keep it a secret. go through the relationship route and sign the guy. But I thought those three guys were big for Michigan State today.
Yeah, Leonard Ayu, I was kind of hoping we'd see him in spring practice, but it sounds like his mission's going to extend into April and March, not going to be a guy that's going to be enrolling in January. Unfortunately for us, we'd like to get a look at him. Fair question, what kind of rust is he going to have after not playing football for a couple of years? He says they've had players at Oregon State in the past that have been on missions and they come back. And first thing is it'll be a freshman, but it's going to be a 20-year-old freshman, if not older. So long term, that can be favorable for Michigan State. And I've only watched his junior film. He's got some ranginess to him, ability to turn the corner, and that was on a stretched out 6'3.5", 16, 17-year-old frame. You should be able to anticipate putting on some good mass there. So that's an interesting one, a positive one for Michigan State as they try to do more. His junior year, he played some inside linebacker, but like you said, could be an inside linebacker, could be a stand-up defensive end type.
We've seen some signing day additions. I'm going back to that year where they brought in Cassius Pete and Moofy Hunt. Those were like signing day.
Man, those are names from the past.
Yeah, but those were signing day things that created a lot of hype. And I'm not sure, like Cassius Pete had the big reputation because he was a good basketball player and he could, was pretty above the rim type basketball player, but he wasn't really good laterally. Moofy Hunt, I'm not sure, if he was ever a guy that – I think he's a basketball guy that came to football. That's basically how I read it. But those are guys that created some buzz. I'm not sure, Ma Nateote, was he a signing day guy?
He kind of. He was like a silent. He was a silent decommitment from USC for a long time. He was a 4-star.
He was an on-again, off-again guy, and that was the guy that created buzz late in the recruiting cycle. This isn't going to create the kind of buzz that any of those guys created, but I think, he's got the ability to be the guy that people thought some of those other guys were going to be.
Yeah, Nateote moved the needle in terms of the team ranking. But even back then, I was like, 4-star. I said the same thing about the offensive tackles that ended up at Oklahoma, Spencer Brown. Right. He was a 4-star. I usually level with the Michigan State people, the Michigan State fans, Spartan Mag fans. I was like, all respect to Spencer Brown, hardworking guy, good kid, not a 4-star, I didn't think. And then took a while, and then he played well in the bowl game against Pittsburgh, started to flash a few things, and then kind of leveled out again. Went in the portal last year, ended up at Oklahoma, but we're not going to sit here and bang pots and pans together and say everybody's a 4-star. Didn't say that about people who actually were 4-stars. And Mate Nateote, I didn't think was a 4-star. I didn't think he had great speed as a junior. And he became what he is. Good luck to him wherever he is. Now, in terms of underrated players, and the way Michigan State signed today, if you're a Michigan State fan, you're going to have to hope that a lot of these guys are underrated. Number 50 class in the country. I've said for a lot of years that top 10 recruiting classes mean something. Top 15 means something. Top 25 means something. It's hard to be a Final Four team. I'm not going to say playoff team anymore, but a college football playoff team, Final Four, without having some top 10 classes. Top 10 means something. That's hard to do. Top 15, top 25 means something. I've said for years that, in my opinion, classes ranked between 26 and 46 are the same. Just like the also receiving votes at the bottom of the top 25, there's not much difference between 26 and 37. These teams could all beat each other. You don't want to be outside of the top 45. I've said that for years. The thing that's different now is the portal. Can you be a 50 class and add 20 in the portal and regulate things and end up having a competitive program and harness some traction and gain some progress moving forward? That's what Michigan State's setting out to do. They didn't set out to have a number 50 recruiting class, but they set out to sign guys that were their guys without making a lot of reaches. In the old days, you'd throw some reaches in here, have a 25-man class, and just hope for the best, and you plant long-term crops. Now, 18, number 50 class in the country, it's a different dynamic. And I think Michigan State, from what I've heard around, they feel that they recruited well this year. They like a lot of these guys, and I'll get into that a little bit more. But they feel they learned a year, the recruiting terrain, how to recruit at Michigan State, how competitive it is, how hard it is to get 4-stars to visit, and all those things as you move along. And I don't think they want to be in this category long term. That's what they did at Oregon State, possibly partly because that's what you have to do, partly because the guys that got at Oregon State were pretty good and underrated. East Coast bias. A lot of those West Coast guys don't come to the T-shirt camps. They end up being underrated guys. So I don't think that they're going to defiantly say, dude, we're going to recruit our own guys. We don't care if we're ranked number 50 or 55. They expect to recruit better than this in the future. And not to say these guys are bad, but I think these guys are pretty good. I think there's underrated guys in here. There's a lot of good, solid, mid, third-tier guy, three-star guys that have a chance to really build and be good ones. We'll talk about that in a moment. But I'm not going to sit here and say that everything's fine because it's number 50 recruiting class. I'm still getting a lay of the land on how things work with the portal. I've always thought at Michigan State, if you have too many classes ranked outside of the top 50, you're going to run into trouble. That was before the portal. Now can you do 50 and do all right with this? You look at some of the other teams that are ranked similarly. Arizona State's 48, Indiana's 49 recruiting class right now in the On3 rankings. Michigan State 50, Oklahoma State 53, Iowa State 54, Minnesota 55, Louisville 68 with only 13 commitments. That tells me Louisville wants to go heavy into the portal. There's going to be different ways to do things. In the old days, if you were outside of the top 50 into the 60s, you were probably going to be down there with the old Indiana, the old Northwestern, the old Vanderbilt, and it's hard to build from there, especially if you have two classes over a 5-year period like that. Not like that anymore with the portal. We're going to be covering the portal in December and in the months ahead. But number 50 recruiting class, Smith was asked what he thinks about stars. He was respectful of rankings and so forth, and he did say, yeah, we'd like to have more of those in the future.
So I think
fair?
Yeah, I mean fair. But the thing I think you got to think about with recruiting now, you can have, like we've seen some Mel Tucker classes that were ranked in the top 25, but none of those guys are left.
Right.
So to me, it's like, okay, so with the high school recruiting, the way I think of it is you have to sign guys that you think are going to be program guys that are going to be willing to develop within your program. And if you do that, if you've got, let's say there's 18 guys right now in there, including our long snapper from Hudsonville, and that's, underrated guy right there. But provided these guys are what Coach Smith would call growth development guys. Those are guys that know that they're coming in and they're going to be working hard, and maybe they get a chance to play in year one, maybe not. Maybe they get a chance to play in year two, but they're going to have to work their way through it. These are long-term guys, and so it's not like you're signing 5 defensive linemen. You're signing a handful of defensive linemen that you think are going to fit you, and then you're supplementing your current needs with portal guys. So to me, it's not what the ranking is right now. It's how many of those guys are going to be there next year. Because if you look at Michigan State's defensive line class from a few years ago that raised the needle for everyone, at least nationally, it was like a real talking point. Michigan State's got a top 5, top 10 defensive line class with Job and those kind of guys, and Andrew DePape. None of those guys are here. The only guy that's still here is Jalen Thompson. The guy that was, ironically, he's a low 4-star, but he was ranked the lowest of the guys, of those defensive linemen. So that class
2 years ago
doesn't exist anymore. I mean, it's just so whatever it was ranked in, yeah, it was ranked higher, but none of those guys are here. I'm looking at this class and I'm looking at the personality types they targeted, the guys that want to compete, want to be part of the program. I think there's a greater likelihood that you're going to have a higher percentage of those guys in the program willing to develop than we've seen in some of the recent classes that Michigan State signed. And so is. With penalty-free transfer, with people being able to move as freely as they can, if you can keep some guys, it's beneficial. And I think the last class of Michigan State signed, if you look at their first recruiting class, I think under Smith, I think there's some good guys in there. I think there's some guys that are really going to develop nicely, but going back just a couple of years, like you look at it right now, I should have done the math on how many of those guys are still here.
I got it right here. That class 2 years ago, Tucker's last class, 2023, ranked number 23 in the country. 4-star by Job. He had some athletic ability, but needed to learn how to play football, and he's bouncing around. Andrew DePape from Iowa. I mean, the Hawkeyes didn't recruit him.
His coach flat out. I'm not even going to go there.
Yeah, 4-star guy. Jordan Hall still around. Stanton Ramil closed the season strongly last year. These are the 4-stars. Keyshawn Blackstock, JUCO transferred out to Arkansas. Jalen Thompson, good freshman year. This year, I don't want to say sophomore.
He's solid,
James.
Man. He's solid. But of that defensive line class that was ranked so highly, he's the only one that's still here.
Right. The highest ranked 3 stars, Chance Rucker, was starting, injured. Cole Dillinger's been injured, had trouble getting on the field. Eddie Pleasant gone. Jalen Barberin gone. Isaiah Johnson doing some pretty good things. That's a guy I thought was underrated.
Yeah.
He was like a low 3-star when he committed out of Virginia. I'm like, man, that guy looks pretty good. Jalen Smith not on the field yet. And these other ones are the
Jalen Smith did play this year a couple times.
Yeah, these other ones are lower, kind of a mid-tier 3-star guys.
But guys
Sean
like,
Brown, Phillip Davis, and then that's the rest of that
But you
class.
look
That's
at
a top 23 class, and that's everybody.
But you look at it like Sean Brown, they paid a lot of money for him, and they paid a lot of money for a lot of. The reason why that class was top 25 is because they backed up the Brinks truck and paid for a lot of guys that other guys weren't willing to pay for.
And
they bought themselves a top 25 class, and the guys that were the bedrock of that top 25 class, the defensive linemen, which really kind of, in my opinion, if you have a good D-line class that makes a class or breaks a class, because that's where it's at, those guys aren't here anymore. So I'm not saying that this 50 ranked Michigan State class is going to be a great class. I'm just saying that one of the ways I'm trying to wrap my eyebrows around it and change the way I'm thinking is not on class ranking, but where are these guys? Like before, it used to be if you have a 25% bust rate. In the old days, it wasn't a good deal.
33% was doable. If 66% stay,
right,
you can work with that.
But now you're sitting there like, what's a bust rate anymore? But I'll tell you right now, the number of players that are left from that class, this should be prime time for that third year. It should be, these guys should be stars all over the field in that third year. They're not, except for a handful of guys, and there's some good players in there. Don't get me wrong, but I'm saying they're not even in the program anymore.
And there's Parachek, he's still growing.
Parachek's good.
Sam Levitt's looking really good.
Yeah, I get it, but I'm just saying.
Those are the 4 stars also.
But he's looking really good for other people. I'm just saying, in my mind, you got to look at a class. If you're trying to develop and you're trying to have that effective balance between portal talent, meeting immediate needs, and high school talent, kind of like in baseball, your farm system, free agency versus farm system. I think that's kind of how you have to look at it. But if you have like a baseball draft class and all of a sudden they're gone the next year, it doesn't work. You got to keep on developing it. So my thing is, we've always said, even when we were looking at those past classes, when we had the print magazine, when we did the class reviews, it's like, what's going on in the third year? That's kind of the be all end all. And if they're not there, is that a good class? It's not. So to me, it's like, are you meeting your recruiting needs, and are these people staying around long enough to develop into the type of players that you thought they'd be on the recruiting trail? And I think you got to, for Michigan State to do the model of program that Jonathan Smith wants, I think you need classes like his first recruiting class and this one to develop effectively and stick around. And you also need good immediate help from the portal. It doesn't just have to be 1-year portal guys. I think Ben Roberts from Oregon, that was a big get for them last year because he's a 3-year guy. He's got 2 years left. So that helps alleviate some of the issues that Michigan State had with 1-year portal guys. But our guys sticking around, can they develop within your program? We don't know that with these top with this 50 ranked class right now, but I suspect a lot of those guys are going to be around longer than the guys that were 2 years ago.
And these days, people that are going to redshirt and be second, third string for the first 3 years, there's less and less tolerance for that. So holding guys for a long term, that's not the way you plant your crops these days. There's some that are that way. Some are going to be like Trey Holloman in basketball that stick around, and then you have to factor that in. So that the portal is going to be a part of it. You just wrote a story about that. Jonathan Smith touched on it today, saying he would like for the high school ranks to be a big part of it, but he thinks with the landscape, it's going to be more of a 50-50 thing. So does that mean, what do you take that to mean about 50-50? Like every year you're going to bring in the same number of portal guys as high school guys? Because that's kind of what it's looking like this year. They signed 18. They're expecting 20 plus in the portal.
It depends on how many guys are moving out of your program, right? And you don't really know that. The December portal is for adding, but it's also for subtracting. Yeah. So you don't really know. Like last year, there's a huge roster turnover for Michigan State. I think what he's saying is, to him it feels like it's going to be that. I think what he said too is he'd still like to try to get more high school guys and portal guys if possible. But I think he also feels encouraged too because the portal guys they did sign last year. If you go and look at that portal class,
excellent.
It was really good. Jordan Turner, and not only excellent in terms of helping out, but these are, for the most part, really good kids.
Yeah, so, and he there's Ed Woods. We've talked about all the other ones. Jordan Turner did a good job. Karon Lynch-Adams. Up and down the roster, you had, you mentioned Ben Roberts. Daquan Dowse had a really good season at defensive tackle. Luke Newman, very good at left guard. A good hit rate last year in the portal. They signed 23 guys. Some of those guys are developmental guys for later. But a good 10, 12, 13 of those guys hit, whereas Tucker's last couple of years, when they hit the portal, the hit rate was really slim. They would sign 20 and maybe 2 or 3 would be good players. The one huge exception, of course, 2021 with Kenneth Walker. What they did with Walker, that was kind of like winning your first hand of blackjack, and you think you're good at it all of a sudden. But evaluation of the portal was not good with Tucker's last 2 years. This first year with Smith was very good. And we mentioned that after the game on Saturday. It's going to need to be good again this December. And I mentioned this last night at Spartan Mag Live. The word is that Michigan State has gotten a lot of interest from players already. Even though the portal's not open, it could be a situation where you've recruited players in the past and they still have your phone number as a coach and they're reaching out. So it's a good situation right now, and they're getting deep into the quick evaluations because evaluation in that portal is part of it. Then you have to go recruit the kid. But Michigan State's going to have an opportunity to do well in the portal.
Yeah, and I think it's more than just evaluation. I think too, it's development. Some of that stuff was absolutely necessary, right? There's such a huge roster turnover. You had to get guys like Jalen Satchel, Ben Roberts, Ruquan Buckley on the field, but you don't get those guys on the field without good development. And especially on the defensive side of the football, to me it was really surprising how many guys. Anthony Jones is another guy. Jordan Turner's a guy that played a lot of football. You expect him to make a quick transition, but Ben Roberts isn't the guy that played a lot of football. Ruquan Buckley is a guy that has not played a lot of football prior to this. Ant Jones not played a lot. He's played some, a pretty good amount, but still a young player. So I think it's a combination of player development and evaluation.
All right, so in that portal, Michigan State is probably going to try to get some pass rush help. And that's not going to be easy. Everyone in the country wants that. So things like that, an offensive line, they're going to get 3 or 4 offensive linemen in the portal. That's not easy. Those are things that you're better off building long term, and that might be more of an old school approach. We'll see what happens. In the meantime, Paul, did you know that prior to the pandemic, Michiganders were taking back their bottles and cans at a rate close to 90%? That has fallen to 75%. That's more than $100 million of unclaimed money and tons of materials that needlessly end up in landfills. Schupan Recycling has been a big supporter of Michigan State athletics over the years, and they are reminding us that one of the beauties of our deposit system is that it creates the cleanest recycling material for the beverage industry to make new cans and new bottles. When Michigan's rate of bottle redemption drops, it hurts the environment and it hurts all of us. So help the environment, help your state, take those bottles and cans back, take them back. They're your lakes, your roads, and your beaches, and it's your dime. So take them back. It's worth your time, and everyone will benefit. Take them back. A message from Schupan, a great Michigan company dedicated to recycling, dedicated to the Michigan State Spartans. We appreciate their support here. Let's talk about underrated players in this recruiting class. Because if Michigan State's going to get where they want to get in a few years, some of these guys need to have been underrated recruits. And the first one that jumps off, I talked about Ayden West last summer, but also Jaden Savory, the tight end from Orchard Lake St. Mary's. Last year when he committed, I looked at his film. I'm like, same type of thing. That I could see this guy being a 4-star. Saw him in some 7-on-7s last summer. There were a couple times when he didn't quite high point the ball like I maybe wanted him to as a tight end prospect. Looking at his senior film, that's coming around for him. He's gotten thicker. Orchard Lake St. Mary's wins a state championship this year. They do a lot of physicality in the run game. They'll attach him to the offensive line. He'll block down. He'll log. He's got some strength to ragdoll some people at that level. Off the line of scrimmage, when he's tight to the offensive line, his initial acceleration to get into the seam, get downfield is excellent. And a guy that used to be specifically a basketball guy, still somewhat new to football. He's improving rapidly. And what is he? He's ranked like number 17 in the state. Come on, man. He's the number 1 tight end of the state. But I look at him, and he's like number 12 or 15 tight end in the Midwest. I've not watched all the guys in the Midwest. Back in the old days when this was in February, we'd have more time to get into it. But we were just studying Rutgers a couple of days ago. We were watching the Maui Invitational. Haven't had a chance to go back and look at all these tight ends in the Midwest that are ranked ahead of him. I doubt I'm going to find many that are ranked ahead of him in the Midwest at the tight end position. I guarantee there's not many that are ranked ahead of him in the tight end position in the Midwest that they would trade this guy for. Secondly, good student, good citizen, champion, all those things. Jaden Savory, not making any guarantees here, but he's the type of guy you want in your talent pool, and I think he's underrated as the number 17 player in the state of Michigan.
I do not know why this is in our state. We have so many guys that are overrated in football, in my opinion, sometimes. But guys that play two sports, guys that play basketball and play basketball for a long time and aren't just football only, they tend to get overlooked pretty significantly. And there's been a lot of guys that were quality, like 3-star players over the years that, football players, they either split time equally. I don't know why it is. Basketball players in Michigan get overlooked. To me, if you're a good basketball player, a MAC level type basketball player, or a team that could play for mid-major or D2 or whatever, that's a good thing for football, especially at the tight end position. And the thing I like about him is he's got a ton of upside, but he's not a guy that has to come in and produce right away, because there are a lot of older players in the program. You guys like Jack Velling, Mike Masunis, Brennan Parachek that you mentioned before, but he's going to learn from those guys. And seeing where he went from his freshman year, or from his first year playing, varsity football from there to last year, huge jump. Even from when he was playing 7-on-7 in the summer, because we saw him play 7-on-7 a little bit, and I'm like, he moves really well, but now he looks like a football player. He's got a huge upside. That's a guy to get excited about in the state of Michigan. And tight ends are weird. Sometimes the best tight ends aren't ranked very highly, but that's a guy that's athletic, and I think Michigan State does a nice job with tight ends. They're lucky to have him.
Yeah, he's improving rapidly still, and the acceleration was nice. You see a fingertip catch from him against West Bloomfield. You see him with a deke leader in the state title game against Byron Center as a blocker. I think he's further along as a blocker than Parachek was. Parachek was a 4-star. Parachek's got a good future. But and I like Parachek, but I think Savory is more advanced than Parachek was at the same stage.
Byron Center is a team from my neighborhood, and I've seen those guys play plenty. If you're blocking against those guys, you're doing a good job.
And and with the way they run the ball, they ask him to, like I said, attach to the offensive line, reach block, and stay low and drive, and he's doing those things. And he's getting thicker now. So Jaden Savory, I thought I was intrigued by him as a commitment in the summer. Intrigued to see what his senior film would be, and it's been good. And he's listed at 6'4", 230. I think he's looking pretty good. And that was a good job by Michigan State to go out in-state, meet coaches, do some evaluation, get in on Savory early, get a commitment in the summer, and it's paying dividends. He's ranked number 880 in the country by On3. I don't agree with that. And I'm getting comfortable with national rankings and what number 880 means, what number 913 means, because I did that in the pre-snap read all year. You're going through every starter that Michigan State played against and where they were ranked, so the readers can kind of see what they were and what they became. 880 is like, it's mid 3-star. I mean, this guy's at least a high 3-star in my opinion. I think he's a 4-star.
Does some of that have to do with guys not being ranked by one of the services?
Yeah, that's the composite. I didn't look to see if somebody.
I think that's the problem, because you look at. I'll give you an example. You look at Leonard IU. He's ranked in the top 5 by 3 of the. He's ranked in the top 5 in Hawaii by 3 of the 5 or 4 services, and he's ends up in the composite being ranked number 8 in Hawaii, despite none of the people ranking him having him 8 in Hawaii. On3 has him number 3 in Hawaii. But so like if one of the services doesn't have a guy ranked.
Mm-hmm. No, Savory's 3-star across the board. Yeah, so everybody's wrong on
this. But anyways, he's a dang good player and
good prospect. We can't guarantee he's going to be a good player, but I like him as a prospect.
Like Josiah Price was the guy that came in and was a 3-star, and we saw him at camp and he could catch everything. And I'm not saying he's like Jaden Savory's like with the catching ability of Josiah Price, but that's a guy that wasn't ranked very highly coming in. He
was like a 2-star before he committed.
Yeah,
good body control hands. Had a nice career at Michigan State for sure.
I mean,
he had to learn how to block.
Yeah, I mean, but look, he was like, go back and see how many touchdowns he had during the Rose Bowl year,
terrific.
13 or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he was a mismatch nightmare. He wasn't a great blocker, and that's why he didn't play in the NFL. But in terms of being like an underrated tight end that can really be a difference maker, an athletic guy in space, he was terrific. But this guy is good.
Go ahead.
One of the guys I really liked was Cal Thrush.
Yeah, defensive lineman from Upper Arlington, Ohio, one of 2 Ohio commitments.
Yeah, you look at, like, I know why he's not ranked really highly, probably because he's not like an uber athlete. And a lot of times guys get hyped up because they're like, way outside the tight end, and that's all they do is they're just taking off and going after the quarterback. But he plays like he's a college football player, gets off blocks, is physical, makes tackles. It remains to be seen what position he's going to play. But the thing about Cal Thrush is, he does already some of those defensive tackle things where he's not. It's okay if an offensive lineman's locked up on him. He's got the technique to get off of those blocks and make plays. And I can just see like he moves around on the D line. Not a lot of guys do that in high school. He's smart. He communicates, and he's the kind of guy that's going to be a quality. I mean, I don't know where he's going to play. I don't know if he's going to start ever in his career. Maybe he won't, but I can see him being a rotation guy. And for a defensive lineman, that matters. And to me, he's got a high upside, and I think he's going to stick around. And, I mean, he comes from a great high school program, well coached. I think he's going to be a good one.
Yeah, Thrush, he's grown into his frame a little bit more also. And I'm going to see where they had him ranked. I should know this off the top of my head. I apologize.
He's around number 50 in Ohio, I think.
No, he's lower than that. But why can't I find this? I thought you were going to keep talking. So Rush, 6'4", 240. He's ranked number 50 in Ohio, 1,200. So that's a low 3-star. Underrated. Looking at him committed in the summer, good frame. What I liked about him in his junior film, he had some of that ankle flex to turn the corner. Not saying that he can't be a defensive end, because when you show that ankle flex to turn the corner, you got a chance to be a defensive end like a Marcus Rush. He's not quite as explosive as Rush was. Rush was excellent. But he has a chance to be a DN because of that ankle flex. He had smart and strong hands, upper body quickness, can cross your face, put a shoulder club on you, swim move, get around you as a junior. I hadn't heard anything about him becoming a defensive tackle last year. But watching him this year in his senior film, he's added some weight, 6'4", 240. I asked Smith about it, whether, is he growing into be more of a defensive tackle? And he said possibly. They don't know what position he's going to be, like you said. So when you have that kind of ankle flexibility and athleticism, that upper body quickness, and you grow into being a defensive tackle, now you got a chance to be a plus athlete at your position. At defensive end, he might have just been a guy with some ability, but with that athleticism moving inside, provided that you have other guys you recruit to become legitimate edges, he could be a plus athlete inside. Now he's enough of an athlete that they put him at wide receiver, threw a Hail Mary to him in a game, and went up and caught it. And they threw a little bluff route touchdown to him in the deep red area. And as a tight end, showed some quickness doing that. Excellent lateral movement. I was watching him against Hilliard Davidson, and they left him unblocked and optioned him on a couple of plays. And one time, the quarterback hands it off on his own read, midline option, and he converges down. He reads that the running back has it, goes with it down. Converges, pursuit down the line, makes the tackle. Good one-step explosiveness to go make that tackle. Next play, the quarterback keeps it, and he honors the fake and changes direction and goes back and makes the tackle this way. So they're optioning him because they don't think they can block him. They're just going to make him wrong based on the ball, the ball handling. But he made both plays. But the change of direction on that at 240 pounds as a teenager does not grow on trees. Number 50 in Ohio, I'll take it.
One thing else I'd say about him is just we've seen guys make that switch from defensive end to defensive tackle, and sometimes it's tough. I'm thinking of some guys are in the D'Antonio era. They ended up being pretty good players. He's a guy that, because of his technique, that I think he's going to be fine if he ended up moving inside. He's not a guy that's going to have a hard time with that.
Right. And I think it's someone like Tyler Hoover, who was taller, but he didn't have the turn the corner ankle flex that this guy does, but took a long time, 5 years, ended up being a starting defensive tackle for the Rose Bowl team. He was a 4-star guy.
Yeah.
Took a while.
He had a hard time with that technique inside.
Mm-hmm. Like Lawrence Thomas was a linebacker, just kept growing and tried defensive end, didn't quite have that turn the corner ability, ends up going to defensive tackle, ends up being an excellent player for
Joel
championship
Heath
team.
ended up being
Yes.
an NFL defensive tackle, but he struggled with that initial transition from the edge to the inside. He eventually got it, but that's why I think this Rush is a valuable dude. Not just because I think he's underrated, but because I think just in terms of what I see footwork, hands and all that kind of stuff, he's going to be able to make that transition.
He's further along at this stage than Maverick Hansen was in high school. And Hansen had a lot of heart. It's like John L. Smith used to say, you can see what their jump vertical and how they run and how they move and how they hit, but he'd like to get in there and see what their heart is, which you can never do until you get to start to recruit him. We'll see what Thrush does, coming in from Upper Arlington, Ohio guy. You know how those Ohio guys are. I hate to generalize, but they're program guys. A lot of them are. There's a higher incidence of good, solid program guys coming out of those Ohio high school programs. I'm sorry, than other states.
And you need discipline to play defensive line. Not only program guys, discipline the guys. They get better coaching. The defensive line coaching in Ohio, like the offensive line coaching too in general is better. I mean, across the board. It
matters.
Coaching defensive line is such a tough thing to do. And you just see when you turn on film and it's Upper Arlington's a great program. You turn on like Brother Rice film or whatever, Detroit Catholic Central, it's fine, it's good. But I'm just saying, in general, the defensive linemen out of Ohio get a lot better coaching in terms of the foundation they need for the next level than you get here in Michigan.
I agree with you. Ranked number 1224 in the country, 1,224. That's low 3-star. Yeah, I think no guarantees on these guys, but yeah, I'd say that he's better than that. Another one, Bryson Williams, Orchard Lake St. Mary's. Now you can say, well, he's getting a lot of attention because he was one of the finalists for Gatorade Player of the Year in the state of Michigan. Rushed for over 100 yards as a tight end, like a slash guy in the state title game against Byron Center for Orchard Lake St. Mary's. He didn't sign today. That gets more attention. And so attention-wise, I'm not going to say he's underrated, but Bryson Williams is ranked number 1,005 in the country, which is like mid 3-star to low 3-star. Number 18 in the state of Michigan. We just watched the senior film. Number 18 in the state of Michigan. I think he's better than the number 2 player in the state of Michigan. I'm just going to say that. Yep. Now, over 100 yards rushing in the state title game. I counted at least 4 or 5 punt returns for touchdowns on this guy. And he's a thick guy at 6'1", 205. Elusive, thick wide receiver. When you watch his high school film, he just looks like, the big athletic cousin that's playing with all the elementary kids. He's got the frame that Saban used to like, and he just has ball skills and a feel and to receive the ball. I've compared him versatility-wise to Connor Hayward, because Connor Hayward was very versatile in high school in Georgia. He's a big, thick, wide receiver, but also played some running back. And you remember Connor Hayward came in, played some tailback, ended up as a tight end in the NFL now. Hayward was a little bigger and thicker. This guy's a different type of athlete, but in terms of the versatility, it reminds me of that. So there might not be a natural position to plug him in at that you're thinking that he looks exactly like this, but I think he's a wide receiver. I think he's a tough cover, and he does some he's big and strong, but he's not stiff. He's got some. I love Bryson Williams, number 18 in the state of Michigan. No, I want this guy, and I'm surprised Moore didn't recruit him. He had an official visit to Harvard. So he's not your garden variety athlete. I mean, this is a guy that's got some dimensions to him, and those dimensions. That's part of why he didn't sign today. And he's his own guy. He's going to do his thing. Michigan State wants him. They're excited about him. We'll see what happens. He's supposed to be signing in February. I can't believe I'm saying he's underrated because he's so well known, but he's underrated in terms of these rankings. He's better than those rankings.
Yeah, it's funny because I remember talking to his high school coach this summer at one of Michigan State's camps, where all the Orchard Lake St. Mary's guys were there, and his high school coach said he is by far the best athlete in the state in his class. And I'm like, always had that in the back of my mind whenever I've seen a highlight come out, and I think of all the different things that he does. And it's easy to kind of take a guy like that for granted. It's almost like, like a guy that's an option quarterback at a really good program like a Muskegon or something like that. And he's not really a quarterback, and he just does everything, and he wins state championships. And you're like, where is he going to play? Oh, if we don't know where he's going to play, he's not going to be ranked really highly. And, I think sometimes guys, because they're an athlete, because they can truly play multiple positions, they get overlooked. But to me, he looks like one of those guys in the NFL that, that get a ton of fantasy football points every week because they can catch the ball, they can run the ball. And, I understand the comparison to Connor Hayward because he's so versatile. But Connor Hayward was kind of like goony and kind of
physical guy.
Yeah, gumpy coming out of I mean, he was just weird. He was weird body shape, moved weird. This guy is just an athlete, and
he can make you miss after the catch too.
He's just like one of those guys that. Yeah, I just think of like Mark D'Antonio would have loved this guy. A guy that, hey, I have to have him. He's athletic. I don't know where he plays, but we're going to find a place for him. I think he could be one of those guys. Like, people are always saying a complimentary running back, but I think he's a guy that could do a lot of damage catching the ball. Even if you did a 2-back set, he's a slot or whatever. He's just a good player. Michigan State's really lucky to have him, and I think. I was just talking to you and Jake Clarizio before the press conference, but just when you read his comments and his quotes, he's a very, very thoughtful human being, and I just think he's uber cautious, and he wants to make absolutely sure, and that's guys like that. They end up in your program that are absolutely sure they're going to stay.
Mm-hmm. I think Bryson Williams is a 4-star guy. I think Ayden West is a 4-star guy. I think Savory's a 4-star guy. And if I was doing the rankings, and if those guys are all 4 stars, you know where this number 50 class would be ranked?
A little bit higher.
Like about 37, 35, something like that. That's just my opinion. Doesn't matter to anybody. These other opinions might not matter either. They're out there rankings-wise. But those guys are underrated. Anyone else before we move on, underrated-wise?
Yeah, I think there's one guy that we both like, and it's always hard to tell because he comes from guys that come from really small schools. But Braylon Collier. Just efficiency. Like, I don't know. Like, we're watching this film today, and I'm just like watching it. And you watch a lot of. I've watched a lot of high school wide receiver film over the years, and guys make amazing cuts.
Tell him what position he's where he's from.
He's from a small town in Ohio.
Sandusky, Cedar Point.
Yeah.
Home of Cedar Point.
Go ahead. And wide receiver. He's at a school of about 700 people. Michigan State's had guys from that conference before come up. Derek Hobing was from Vermillion, Ohio, from that same conference, but. Braylon Collier is just a really good wide receiver from a small school. Sometimes those guys are just like, just are really, really productive because of the talent level. But watching his film, I wasn't looking at the guys he was playing against. I was looking at how he moves on the field and just the efficiency of movement, subtle cuts that make big differences. He's just a dang good football player. He can get up and get the ball. I know some people have said ball skills like Trey Mosley. He runs a lot better routes than Trey Mosley did at the same age. So Mosley was a guy with a good ball skills, but he really struggled to tighten up his routes, and that was kind of a constant issue for him and probably hurt his ability to make it to the next level. But Braylon Collier is a guy that really, really impressed me when I was watching this film this morning. I had to do a couple of those. Watch a couple clips over and over again because it's like, man, how did he make this guy move that much with just a subtle movement? And you just can't, you can't find guys like that.
Yeah, today, early this morning on Underground Bunker message board over at Michigan State, I posted Collier. I was watching his senior film last night and impressed with it. Liked his junior film, but watched his senior film again, and I felt compelled to put his video up there and make some comments about it. Trey Mosley's a good, solid college football player. Collier, I would guess, probably has 10 more inches on the vertical jump than Trey Mosley did. Not only can he jump, he goes up at high points and gets it and snags it. Had a couple of one-handed apex of your leap, high point the ball, like wow catches on that film. One was preseason scrimmage, the other one was in a game, but he's got speed to match. And like I asked Jonathan Smith about him today, and you mentioned it also. That speed translates to the route running. He doesn't need 3 or 4 steps to make a cut. It's one cut and gone, and it continues to accelerate, and those hands to go with it. And let's see. I got to see where he was ranked, but he was like 40 in Ohio or something like that. All right, I compared him. What I mentioned, and nothing against anybody, but there was a wide receiver that was a 4-star. Cameron Flowers, I think, from West Bloomfield.
I didn't like
now he has great speed. Flowers does, and he camped at Michigan State, but he's just kind of a little stiff, and just the catch radius is not great, and the smoothness. He needs some work, but he's got all kinds of speed. Michigan State could have gotten Flowers, and maybe it'd be good to just have that speed in the roster, see what happens, and in this day and age, you just move him onto the portal later. That's one way you could do things. Flowers is like ranked number 5 in the state, 4 in the state. Collier's like 40 in Ohio. Collier's a better wide receiver right now than Flowers is. And if you don't have Collier and you have Flowers, in my opinion, you've got a weaker class, but again, you're ranked in the top 40 nationally or top 35, then your ranking can. And if you want to recruit out of a book and recruit to have a good high ranking, then you take guys like that. Or you can evaluate and find this guy in a small school on Lake Erie that can run around and make these plays. And I like Collier. I think he's got a chance.
Yeah, I mean, the thing I really respect about Courtney Hawkins I mean, Courtney Hawkins has got a good eye for talent, but a good developer of talent. But he wants dogs. And the thing is if you recruit, let's say you have a Braylon Collier and a Cameron Flowers, you bring that guy in, and all of a sudden Braylon Collier is better than him. Flowers is transferring right out, and that's it's one of those deals. But
Nothing against Cam Flowers.
no, but I think I thought Michigan State did a nice job getting an athlete in Isaiah Johnson. A couple years ago, and Isaiah Johnson has really developed into a nice player with a lot of hard work because he was really raw coming in. Our guy Braylon Collier, he is a lot further along, and he does a lot of really good things, and he's going to be a good one, I think.
All right, so Cameron Flowers, he dropped to number 8 in the state of Michigan. He's like number 478. Got a lot of speed. I think he's going to sign with Toledo. Okay, Cameron Flowers. He was 4-star last summer. Michigan State could have had him, and it would have made the class look better. Some people that used to work for Michigan State would have wanted that to make the class look better. But Flowers is still ranked the number 1 wide receiver prospect in the state of Michigan. Braylon Collier is better than the so-called number 1 wide receiver ranked in the state of Michigan. But Collier's ranked number 37 in Ohio, which is not bad, number 950. But I would agree, underrated. Collier's about 6'1", but he plays taller than that. Now he's got to add some strength. He's got to come in and put some man muscle on and things like that. I'm not sure he's an immediate guy, but he's got a lot of skill. It might take him a little bit of time like Isaiah Johnson did. I liked Isaiah Johnson's film a lot, too, when he was an underrated guy. We'll talk. We'll just a couple more minutes here. Anyone else? I just want to talk about in-state recruiting also.
But the in-state recruiting, we can segue into that. But I think one of the most important guys in this class would be Derek Simmons.
Yeah.
I just think that anytime. Oh crap.
We're running out of time.
A little bit of battery problems, but anytime.
Defensive tackle Frankenmuth playing the state title game.
Quick feet. I mean, a small school. I just anytime you can get a guy that moves like that at that size, you just can't have enough of them. And this is a guy they made a priority. That's the other thing I would look at this class and say, how many of these guys are early recruiting priorities? We used to talk about that a lot during the D'Antonio era. Are you going in and getting these guys late? Are they late, mid-level 3-stars, or are they guys that you want early? And a lot of these guys out there are guys that Michigan State really made an early priority, and Derek Simmons being one of them. And I think he's a guy that, they might not move the needle on a signing day, but guys like that can make your class down the road.
Sure, Simmons is ranked. He does move the needle. He's a borderline 4-star. And again, Michigan State might have overlooked previous regimes. He's a 4-star in the On3 industry rankings, number 11 in the state of Michigan. Defensive linemen are so hard to find that when you're that good, they number 11 in the state. Man, there's people in front of him that are dime a dozen DB type frames. You get a defensive lineman who's good, like Derek Harmon when he was ridiculously ranked number 30 in the state.
Why aren't those guys not in the top 5? They're the hardest to find. So why aren't they in the top 5?
If you're good enough to be good enough, and there's fewer of you in your category, that makes it's the old economic theory that it's supply and demand, and there's not much of a supply of linemen. This guy's a lineman. No guarantees he's going to be good, but he looks good. Quick feet. Some good stuff with arm over moves. His offensive line tape is good. I remember saying when he committed, I'm like, he could be like a Big Ten level offensive line. I think that's the guy I was thinking of. But defensive tackle reminds me of Mike Martin a little bit. Remember him? Detroit Catholic Central, went to Michigan. Good player, 2nd-round draft choice, I think. Simmons, I don't want to put that kind of pressure on him. But to your point, Michigan State liked him, went to Frankenmuth, good program.
Don't like Frankenmuth. I like him.
You don't like the town of Frankenmuth?
No, I do not.
I like the town of Frankenmuth. I was there last spring. Hadn't been there in a while. Put me on in the category of liking Frankenmuth.
I got stuck there for 3 days too long. At a softball tournament that wouldn't end.
All right. I'll give you that. I like Frankenmuth. I do. Now, but D-line, Michigan State took the time to evaluate him early, didn't need to spend much time to say we like him and to let him know he had a scholarship offer. And that gives him a lot of time to get warm about Michigan State and like Michigan State no matter who comes after him. And, number 397 in the country, 4-star guy, stock on the rise throughout the season. Good job in-state evaluation there. Michigan State doing a good job getting 3 commitments from Orchard Lake St. Mary's, 2 from Macomb, Dakota, a couple of top 10 teams in the state. The kid from Frankenmuth, closing on the local kid, Jace Clarizio. Just, taking care of business pretty good. I like the Damari Malone kid from Macomb, Dakota, linebacker. Reminds me of Caleb Thornhill a little bit. Really good job. He'll be at cruising speed, then the two-step acceleration when he needs to go. He did that on a speed out against Utica Stevenson, showed some of that speed and then an extra gear in pass defense, solid build, comfortable in pass defense. I like the Malone kid from Macomb, Dakota. His teammate, Justin Bell, 6'6", offensive lineman, needs to be a little bit more of a knee bender, but he's got some brute strength to him. He caves people in when he makes contact. So I think in-state, Michigan State did well, and it has to start there. And I think Michigan State football in previous years ignored in-state to a degree. That's not the case anymore.
Bell's a perfect example of a camp evaluation. Camp evaluations were non-existent under Mel Tucker.
True.
And I know people say, "Oh, you're down on Mel Tucker." I've been to a lot of camps, and they just were not. Like if you weren't the guy they had circled on the list, you weren't going to get an offer. But Michigan State, Smith said that he was a camp eval, and I think a lot of times when an offensive lineman gets an offer on the basis of a camp evaluation, I'll take it because those guys, he had to earn it.
I think the Mullins kid out of Bushnell, Florida, 6'1" corner. I think he's got enough frame that can be a safety. He's ranked number 1,000, like 136 in Florida. Good speed, and he can hip turn, ball judgment. Number 136 in Florida, DB. I think he's better than the number 1 DB in Michigan.
Yeah, and I think Blue Adams has got a really good. He has got a good eye for talent. He knows Florida, and he's been getting good quality players out of Florida forever. And I think this DB class is potentially underrated.
Maybe not better, but comparable. The number 1 DB in Michigan, I think, is more of a safety, a good hitter, but this guy's got better hip turn and speed. The number 1 DB in Michigan, as a guy Michigan State looked at, might be a little bit of a tweener type, but he's a good one. Michigan State would probably like to have him, but they didn't go full blast. He was committed to Pittsburgh prior to that. This guy, number 136 in Florida, like D'Antoni used to say, that the difference between a 4-star and a 3-star is that much. These two guys, that much. We'll see what happens to them long term. Now, Michigan State's something that they need to do, in my humble opinion. They need to recruit more in Georgia. They've not really. That's one thing Tucker did well, among other things. He did some things well. Recruiting, but Georgia, Michigan State did well in Georgia. You can go anywhere from Georgia. It's so accessible with that airport. You can get cheap flights to Michigan, be here in 2 hours if you plan enough in advance. It's accessible, and players going to Georgia, or teams going to Georgia, everybody knows that. Michigan State's not gone in there as much in the last 2 years. I would advise Michigan State to not overlook that part of it.
Yeah, and I think part of that is like who you've got on staff. Keith Banoff is a Texas guy. We've seen that. There's a lot of guys that have recruited, like even Demetrius Martin, who's no longer there, but he's a California guy. Michigan State staff is California guys. They need to find someone that can go into Georgia, and I agree with you because, the thing about Georgia guys is they tend to be more disciplined than some of the other southern, states. I think you got good level talent, a lot of population, and you can see them in the spring. You can make spring evaluations, so there's a lot of good talent down there, and a lot of those 3-star guys from Georgia end up doing a lot.
And they've been open to go to Michigan State.
Yeah.
Plus, Malik Spencer's dad is a wheel down there. Yeah. And you need to tap into that a little bit while he's still here as well. All right, we're going to wrap it up. Can't go over every guy in the class, but Michigan State, we're not saying it's like a grade A top 10 class, but there's some pieces in there and some good ones, I think, some underrated ones. Of the 18, percentages say half of them are going to be gone in 4 years. It used to be you could bank on 1/3 of them being gone. Now it's more than that. Portal's going to be a big part of it going forward. But the root of both of those is evaluation. And these guys believe in their ability to evaluate. They did it well in Oregon State, and that's shown itself. They did it last year. The portal did a good job. The true freshmen last year, they had some pretty good ones that came with them. The commitments they had at Oregon State, the freshmen that came in. Some of those guys are still waiting for Wyatt Hook to get healthy. I think he's got some ability. It's a guy we talked about last year. So they're building it. We'll see what happens. Anything
Mike
else?
Sean Beeler was a really good late pickup for them.
I love Chicago D linemen.
Right. And the guys that are ranked in the 20s or below in Chicago tend to be the best players for whatever reason.
That includes the entire Chicagoland area. Go ahead.
Right. But Mike Sean Beeler was a really good pickup. Raheem Johnson on the offensive line, he's a really good pickup. But if Michigan State can get like production from a Derek Simmons and a Mike Sean Beeler, and those guys end up being multi-year letter winners or whatever, that makes your class so much more. You look at what during the Tucker years, you had one good interior defensive lineman.
through his entire time out of the high school range.
Yeah, Derek Harmon. And so, like...
And he was underrated, and we were banging pots and pans together about him.
Dancing bear. But if you had, like, let's say Simmons and Beeler both pan out, I know Beeler's going to pan out. They really like his direction. If Simmons comes in and has the kind of start that Beeler did, then all of a sudden you're starting to cook with gas because, you've got some good portal talent, but you're starting to revamp those, underclassmen talent. So you're not completely reliant on, we got to get 4, 1-year defensive tackles. I mean, that's how you can sustain a program, by supplementing, getting good 4-year production. So you're not like all free agency all the time. It's more like, get guys from your farm system. And I really think that some of the defensive linemen they've got are good farm system guys that will produce at a later date.
What's wrong with cooking with charcoal?
Nothing.
It's just slower?
No, I don't care. I'd like to cook
Cooking with
charcoal.
gas, I think that analogy means you're ready to go. It's like get you up, it's fast, right?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm working on it.
No, I mean, it's old. It's dated.
No, it's 2023.
Is it?
That was when that came out, cooking with gas for a football analogy. Anything else, Paul?
No.
Konyndyke's going to be driving home. Wish you safe travels. We got some.
I've got some snow gear in the car.
Got some lake effect snow coming in. Does someone still do the lake effect 40? Remember that? That was a good name, like the top 40 players in West Michigan.
No.
Yeah, they should. I enjoyed that. Raekwon Buckley would have been on there at some point. All right. For Paul Konyndyk, my name is Jim Comparoni. I've been watching VCast, covering the Spartans from Spartan Stadium for SpartanMag.com.